Hello everyone, this is Vikas Dayal and today we have with us someone who wrote her first mains in 2020. In her very first mains, she was able to score one of the highest in PSIR optional, that was 254. It might sound a little less, but mind you that it was the year when the highest marks in PSIR optional were in the 280s. And Garima also scored in that particular year in the essay paper 134. So welcome Garima to the YouTube channel.
Thank you, Vikas.
So Garima, we would like to know the story of your first mains. You wrote this year's mains as well. The results are awaited. So what was your story? You changed your optional. Please tell us.
So I graduated in history. So I have done history honors from Delhi University. And after that, the first mains I gave was with PSIR. That was my very first experience. And I scored 254, as you mentioned. And the reason why I was able to, prepare for the next attempt, or I had the courage to give my next attempt, was basically the facts you mentioned. That I scored above average in a few papers and I fell short in one or two papers of my GS papers, and that was the main reason. And I think that is what we need to highlight, that scoring in all the papers doesn't happen with even with every topper. There are stories of people who are scoring exceptionally well in maybe 2 or 3 papers out of the 7 papers, and that is one of the major factors that is basically motivating the people to go for another attempt, because they know they stand somewhere and there's some part where they need to improve. So that is how I felt.
So Garima, looking at your story, you had history as an optional initially. You had to leave it. You changed the optional from history to PSIR. You appeared in that particular mains. You almost had 10 months to prepare for PSIR, and you were able to score like above average marks. Above average marks are really good in UPSC papers because the cutoffs are the topper scores about 50% in the final list, and she was just short by 12 marks in the final list in the general cutoff. So Garima, in 10 months, how were you able to, if somebody is watching, somebody is a new aspirant, somebody wants to learn from you, what would you tell? If some junior of yours, some younger sibling of yours wants to ask, what would you advise?
So a person who has changed the subject, that person has more phobia for that subject. So obviously I had to cover the standard material which is easily available in the market, and I went through the material. And maybe the reason I took PSIR was I felt more comfortable with PSIR than the subject I had in my graduation. The reason which the short period of time and I was able to score this much, the main reason which stands at the back of it is the answer writing I did. And my major focus was the main guide which I followed was previous year questions, because the organization and the commission which is making the paper is the main guide. So I wrote previous year question papers, and the aspirants who have been preparing for PSIR, they must be knowing, looking at the question papers, that the previous year question papers are the major guide, and questions are often repeated when it comes to PSIR. So I did exhaustive answer writing for especially the previous year questions.
Garima, if I can mention, you scored 133 in PSIR paper 2. Sometimes people find it difficult because it involves a lot of current affairs, a lot of analysis of the events that are happening in the contemporary newspaper readings, etc. So how were you able to score 133 while, mind you everybody, it was the year when the highest marks were below 145 in PSIR paper 2, and you scored really well if we look at from this perspective that you only had 10 months to prepare. So how did you do that?
See, first of all, I followed the standard material, but when it comes to the paper 2 of PSIR, first of all, the major difference is created by the questions you pick to prepare and to answer in your paper. So obviously everybody knows we have questions, we have options for the questions. So one of the major factor was I picked up questions I was more comfortable in rather than I know most people would attempt. So that was my choice. And the other thing is, people need to understand that there is a difference between preparing IR for paper 2 and for the PSIR paper 2. There's a huge difference. And people think that it is a current affairs based paper, but I would like to mention that current affairs forms maybe 30% of the part of the preparation. You have to have a good hold of the 2A part of paper 2, which is the static part. If you include all the part, if you prepare that part properly, half of your work is done even for the current affairs part. And majorly what I can say is the questions are majorly on the theme of a particular country. So if you prepare the vocabulary of the relations of India and that particular country, you are halfway already there. So current affairs is just maybe 30% of the preparation. So the focus need to be shifted to preparing the core subject, and which everybody does but not able to inculcate in the answer. So that is what helped me.
So, Garima, you mentioned that basically the paper two, if you want to score more in the paper two, you have to basically prepare the static part of it first. But what should somebody do who has very less amount of time for preparing for the whole option? Somebody is giving the first attempt, or somebody who is writing her or his first mains. So, do they have time for like going through all the basic material and then revising it enough number of times? So how did you manage that, and what would be your advice looking at retrospectively the way you handled it?
Without a doubt, I would say their major guide and focus has to be on previous year question papers. If any serious aspirant has analyzed the papers, they would know, they would find a lot of parallels when it comes to even maybe static part or the current part. And when it comes to PSIR, they know even this current part has very particular questions and which are very much predictable. So if you go by the line of predictability and see that the major focus of the current affairs is revolving around those themes, so you pick up the theme, prepare it, and be confident about your own material. You have gone through the material. See, I'm a person who majorly focuses on maybe a single or a couple of materials and revise them multiple times. And the thing I told you before this, that I prepared the static part more. Static part gives you an edge always. If you mention static part in your current affairs, if you're able to connect it, show the interconnections, that is how you can make a holistic answer, and which helped me score better in paper 2.
So Garima, also like we interacted with a lot of toppers from, like, for example, Gaurav Budania, who scored 295 in anthropology. He also had very less time, although the year when he attempted the paper, the toppers were scoring way higher than in your attempt. So what would you advise, like if you have less time, then you can use the material from paper 1 in paper 2. You can club a few topics from paper 1 and 2 and read them together and make a content of your own. So in that particular way, interlinkages between subjects, what did you understand with your experience of these attempts, and this particular attempt as well, because you are in the groove of UPSC preparation right now?
So when it comes to PSIR, the beauty is that it has a lot of parallels with the GS paper. So what I did this time particularly, and I was not able to do it last time, was I actually did an integrated study of those particular topics which I see in maybe GS paper 2. A lot of it is not absolutely same, but there's a very much strong connection with those topics and my PSIR subject. And I was able to even use the knowledge from both the parts. I used my PSIR knowledge, not particularly the very particular vocabulary of PSIR in my GS paper, but I was able to use the ideas, the dimensions I had. And that is how my GS2 score ran parallelly with my optional score. And when it came to GS, because in GS we cover a lot of dimensions, that is our focus. We try to answer as many dimensions as possible. So that is also what I incorporated in my PSIR. And what people need to understand is that maybe there are four sections in this entire syllabus of PSIR, but if you can show that you can actually make interconnections, you can mention Western philosophers in your optional in your IR paper. You can definitely make. You can put up. This year what I draw parallels was I used Kautilya maybe in my IR answer. That is a part of 1A, but I used it in 2B. So that shows that you have the entire understanding of the syllabus. Your answer has to revolve around the syllabus, and that is what I tried to do, and I hope like my score enhances this time because of that.
So Garima, I can tell you viewers that like Garima's answer writing was really good. She used to write a lot of PYQs, and like a lot of seniors and people who were good at it, they always used to praise the way she used to write. So that's why I thought of interviewing her for knowing what she did that made her write so well. So Garima, I would like to ask you this particular question. While you are preparing your PSIR option, you do this interlinkages between 1A and 2B, but how do you get validation for that? Like, if somebody who is new to this, somebody tries something something unique, but how do that person get confidence in that particular field, whether it is good or not, whether it is going to get fetch you marks or not? Because that is the constant fight. You experiment, you make your notes, you are not satisfied with them, whether they are going to make you score that much or not. So how did you the experiment that you did with interlinkage of subjects? Did you learn it from some coaching, some topper talks, some material? So how did you do that?
See, as you mentioned, it's a constant fight. It's also a constant learning process, according to me. So I started experimenting on a on a daily basis. I used to write 2 answers per day when I had a little bit more time. And initially, then with the passage of the time, I tried to increase the number of answers. So the major thing I can say which helped me was constant evaluation, constant feedback, which I got from a couple of seniors who really helped me in my journey. They gave me honest views about my answers. It was a critical evaluation they did. Because as far as coaching institutes or the test series are concerned, maybe they are helpful when it comes to covering the syllabus. But when it comes to a proper evaluation you need for a particular answer, you need somebody who has maybe gone through the process and who knows what their flaws were and what helped them. So that is where I took most of my learnings from.
So, Garima, you mentioned that that's what the purpose of the initiative that we run is, so that if you have seen somebody who has gone through the process, then that person is the best guide. And the best guides obviously are the people who are in the list or who are in the academy, but they do not have time. So by default, the de facto best guides are the people who are still in the process, just like you, just like many people who could not clear the cutoff by few marks, but you know the way, but you were short of, just like, had there been more seats, you would have been in the list. So what would you advise to somebody who does not have a PSIR background? There are many engineers, there are some people who did not study that subject in their graduation. So you did the same thing, you studied history and then you switched to PSIR as an option. So how difficult it is, how scoring it is, it was bad for you because the scores did not go that well that particular year. So what would be your opinion on that particular front?
Yeah, so 2 of the things that attracted me to PSIR was that it is a scoring optional, which did not work in favor of me that year. But the other was that I felt it like I was more in sync with that subject. I used to read that subject a lot. It was interesting to me. That was one of the reasons. But when it comes to the background of the student, maybe the student is from a medical background, an engineering background, or those sorts of subjects, initially it's very natural for a person to feel little bit, standing on a slippery slope that, I might not be able to catch the vocabulary, or I won't be able to write this many answers and in an elaborative format and flowery language. But I don't think any of that is required in this. It's a very interesting subject when it comes to the UPSC syllabus we have seen. It's very relatable and it has a lot of parallels with the GS. That was another reason why I chose PSIR. I don't think that a background matters, because the notes which are available maybe in the market, and maybe you can listen a lot of toppers talk if you listen to, it's a lucid subject because it's very relatable. We read about it in the newspapers, and a lot of, I think a majority of students you'll ask who are preparing are usually very much comfortable when it comes to political science. Maybe polity for the prelims stage, everybody feels comfortable. So I think there's some sort of attractiveness towards this subject because it is not easy, but it is very much relatable. So I think the background doesn't matter for me at all, because I actually switched from history to political science. It was a major change. But if I saw the previous year syllabus as my guide and I focused on these 2 particular things, and the demand was to write answers, and I focused on writing answers and covering the syllabus. If you restrict to what you need to do, I think a lot of work is done right there and then. So that is what I